Hello, Squad Fam, and welcome to another Sinister Sunday. And today, we're also going to the United States because I believe that there's no way to visit this hospital. You can't go in. It's in super disrepair. As you see, this is an actual picture from the place, and there you go, like floors falling in and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, and I never heard of it before. So, I would like to do a little online investigation of Willard Asylum in Willard, New York, USA. So, let's get right to it. Okay, I'll give you a little history and then we'll get really into it. This chronic asylum came into existence in 1869 and had the capacity of around 4,000 patients at the time. The asylum witnessed around 50,000 deaths, out of which only a few were natural. Well, this makes the asylum and its morgue one of the creepiest places and the scariest as well. The Willard Drug Treatment Center was opened in 1995 on the campus of the former Willard Psychiatric Hospital and Facility for Mental Patients. So they probably closed it down and then opened some other facility on it. Oof. That must have been fun for the patients. The drug treatment, seeing the ghosts. In 1995, some 400 suitcases that were brought in by the patients were discovered in an asylum attic. And that's the only history that they have on Wikipedia. What do you think? Okay then. Let's see what else we could find. Willard Asylum for the Chronically Insane, an abandoned asylum where patients have been forgotten, but their possessions remain. Falling to pieces, but the contents inside betray a lot about the sometimes happy, sometimes tragic lives at Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane. Though the asylum carries a dark and torturous existence, Willard and other institutions like it were intended to be a better alternative to systems in place for taking care of the mentally ill. In the early 19th century, those without anyone to care for them and incapable of taking care of themselves were left to the Alsham houses, which were basically shelters. They were overcrowded and under-resourced. In response to these conditions, New York Surgeon General at the time, Dr. Sylvester D. Willard, proposed a state-run hospital for the insane. Abraham Lincoln himself signed off on the proposal a mere 6 days before his death. Oh, that's interesting. Willard welcomed its first patient in 1869. She was a woman named Mary Rote, described as demented and deformed, who spent 10 years confined to one of those shelters. The theme of the horrific neglect would follow in patients admitted later. One girl had been shackled in a cell since childhood. Another patient arrived at Willard in a chicken crate. The dreadful situations patients were arriving, coupled with the lack of understanding of mental disabilities, meant that Willard essentially became a dumping ground for the undesirable. Aww. Patients' afflictions ranged from severe mental and physical handicaps to nervousness, chronic to acute insanity, and lunacy. The asylum was built in the same style as many other Victorian institutional facilities, which you can see in the background here is what it looks like. Okay, the campus was divided between a women's side and a men's side, with a violent end and a non-violent end. An administration building sat in the middle. The land had originally been designated for agricultural purposes, so the hospital ran its own farm with crops grown and tended by patients. Oh, that's nice. If they treated the patients nice. Patients were unconfined. They were able to walk around as they pleased, but they weren't able to leave the premises. There was a bowling alley, a movie theater, a gymnasium, and patients took part in camp-like activities like sewing classes. It was still a hospital, though, and there were entire buildings devoted to treatments like electroshock therapy and ice baths, as well as operating theaters and a morgue. As you can see behind me, this is obviously one of the operating rooms. All these pictures are from that facility, by the way, that are behind me. A cemetery on the grounds features markers with numbers, no names, for thousands buried there. So they're just unmarked graves. Oh. After Geraldo Rivera's 1972 expose on the deplorable conditions at Willowbrook Asylum, numbers in large institutions declined sharply. Willard Asylum discharged its final patient in 1995 and shut its doors for good. Now, some of the buildings are used as training facilities by the Department of Correctional Facilities, which maintains the grounds. But many of the buildings have been left to rot for so long they're unusable. Asylum life has been preserved by the artifacts left behind by the patients and staff members. Behind me is actually a patient's suitcase that was left behind. His name was John, Jon, Crispin. If you've heard of Willard Asylum, it's probably because of the suitcases. A cleaning person stumbled upon hundreds of dusty suitcases in the attic, brought by patients upon their admittance to the hospital. They contained mementos that pieced together a bittersweet picture of their owners, who were identified on handwritten luggage tags. Earl B. brought a newspaper clipping on a smuggling plot. Virginia W. brought a clown doll. The patients died at Willard, and their personal effects went unclaimed by anyone outside the institution. The staff, apparently unable to throw them away, meticulously stored and cataloged the suitcases in an attic. The Willard Suitcase Project now compiles information on the owners of the suitcases. Photos of the luggage carefully packed by the inmates and their families indicate they believed they were just passing through. We simply didn't know what to do with these people who could not fit into the social norms of the 19th century, so they were often shoved away into institutions. Though the people who lived and died at Willard have faded into the tapestry of history, their belongings left behind at the abandoned asylum boldly assert their existence. So they have a know before you go section. The asylum's land is now owned by the Willard Drug Treatment Campus, which is hesitant to allow tourists on its premises for security purposes. Annual walking tours of the asylum have been available in the past, but no new tours have been announced. Okay, so maybe there will be, maybe the COVID stopped it. Who knows? So believe it or not, there's not a lot of information you can find on this. So I'm just going to give you little snippets of what different people who saw the grounds and stuff said. And if I do find anything else, of course, it will be in here. So this gentleman said, I saw this episode on Paranormal State, which showed the Willard Cemetery, which is a disturbing 25 acres of anonymous, unmarked graves. Only the veterans' graves are marked. The video also shows the original State Architectural College building, which was turned into the Branch and later renamed the Grandview, which held over 200 mild insane female patients. The basement of this building is shown quite a bit with its rounded brick architecture. Um, the cemetery is the big attraction, I guess. Willard is unique because it was built exclusively for the chronic insane population of New York State and opened on October 13th, 1869, not 1866 like some people say. Willard's main building, or Chapin House, named after John B. Chapin, was the first physician superintendent of Willard. No longer stands as it was. Demolitions around 1984 or 85. The group of red buildings, which have boarded up windows, is one of the four cottage-style buildings that made Willard different from other state hospitals because they could segregate patients. Over 200 patients in each group of 5 buildings, and expanded the hospital in an economic, cheap way to serve the needs of the state. The cemetery had been blessed numerous times, but the people who are buried there still remain anonymous until they jump out and tell you who they are. So I think this behind me is kind of like what the morgue looked like, because that looks like a morgue to me. Wooden, kind of weird. Okay, but 1800s, who knows? So, the dark side of Willard, besides its craft classes and other fun activities like bowling alleys, whole buildings were devoted to electroshock therapy, and patients were subjected to freezing ice baths in order to calm them down. About 50,000 patients were admitted to Willard Asylum while it operated. About half of them died within the walls of the institution. The Willard Asylum of the Chronic Insane finally closed in 1995. The hospital's cemetery, the final resting place for thousands of unclaimed bodies buried in unmarked graves. After the hospital's closure, cleaning staff stumbled upon hundreds of suitcases in the attic. This is all the information on this place that ran from 1860 something, right? Because they can't figure out what year, to 1995. So what the hell are they hiding? Okay, come on. They were filled with patients' belongings, stuffed animals, lockets, family photos, and journals. Sadly, the contents of many of the suitcases make it clear that quite a few of the patients believed their stay at the asylum would be temporary. Yep, that's all there is. Everyone. It's really terrible because they probably tortured these patients. Like, really tortured them. And they just don't have any information except that they have their suitcases. I mean, I could show you guys pictures of that, but I'm really just surprised at the lack of history on the place. I mean, my God, we did a lot of Sinister Sundays and we found stuff on, we found pictures of ghosts on Google, like it's just super weird to me. Okay, Squad Fam. So I did find, but it's in a PDF, like book form, of a local person who lived in the area, wrote this whole book about this asylum, which discussed the first patients, the patient's early years, the form of treatments, the entertainment, amendments and nurses, treatment for insanity, the hospital morgues, the farms, the fire department and powerhouse. I mean, he literally, the cemeteries, the evolution in the name, the closure, like different facilities. So he really goes into depth about the history. I'd have to read this whole 60-page documentary. I might read some of it and give you, that. But I mean, the local people referred to the people who go to Willard as they belonged to Willard. Like now they're there and that's where they're going to stay. He even tells you about the construction. Okay, let's see about the first patients. Well, Mary Rote was the first patient. We knew that. Okay, to begin, a female patient at the time of admission to Willard was suffering with Pareidolia of the uterus. You know what that is. When admitted, she was in a state of manic expression and filthy in her habits. She had been in a state of nudity and had not received the attention of a female attendant. A male patient was admitted who had been secured to a post with a chain in a house adjacent to the country poorhouse. Several were reported as having to be confined in irons and in separate rooms from a month-to-month or from a year-to-year basis. For some of the country's patients have been brought well provided with clothing and in a cleanly state, and others definitely have not had any persons interested in their welfare. So yeah, they got all types of patients admitted, and from the beginning, the form of admissions to Willard Asylum was an order of support signed by the superintendent of the poor of the country to which the patient is chargeable. So basically, the state was paying for most of these people because nobody else wanted them. So it's so sad. Yeah, he has a lot of nice, old photos in here. So maybe I'll put the link to this. We know it's definitely haunted. That much we could gather, especially if they took all the suitcases and they took pictures of them and they had like an expo. But I wonder if they put them back. I wonder if there's an expo still somewhere of those. Behind me is all the suitcases. This is where they were found, okay? And when you go look at the expo, supposedly, okay, it's 4 pictures. So I don't know what they're hiding, but if you look on Google, it will show you some of the pictures of all different suitcases, way more than 4. But I'm just surprised with the expo. So I'm really quite intrigued by this place. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to put this up as a Sinister Sunday, but then I'm going to do some more research and see if we could do a part 2 to it. Okay, guys. So I think I'm going to put a link down to that place where you can see some photos and stuff. If you have been to this place, if you know anything about it, if you have pictures from when you went, please, contact me. Leave me a comment, thumbs up on the video, share if you like this series. And as always, if you're not subscribed, we'd love you to join us on our adventures. Click subscribe and the notification bell so you can get notified of all the videos we put out. Well, right now we're doing 2 a week, a Sinister Sunday, is this series, and a Cooking with Chris series where I just make some fun stuff with real little ingredients and pretty cheap so you guys can make it with me. All right, guys, we will see you on the next adventure. And stay tuned because there will definitely be a part 2 of this Willard's Asylum.